along the way? Because I've heard stories of rappers, for example, who say, okay, I was really shy. And you look at them on the stage and you think, really? But they'll say for themselves personally, they couldn't come out of their shell until they were on stage, or being on stage forced them to become more of an extrovert, but in their normal everyday life, they're not that way. So how did you make the transition from things like being an NFL linebacker to becoming a host, TV presenter, becoming a guest on American TV networks such as ABC and NBC and ESPN? How did you do that? Those are big places to be.
Yeah, and Avani, I have to be honest with you. I am an INFJ. That is my MBTI assessment, and so that means I am an introvert. Yes, it is a leap. After I do my next interview a little bit later on, I am going to go and sit down somewhere, because what happens, when you have a message to share, when you're operating in your purpose, then you do what you need to do. You do what you need to do if it's going to help people to grow and develop in their lives, and if that's part of your service. But for me, I recognize that I am an introvert, so it's very draining. It's very draining. So I have to sort of recharge afterwards. So when I got ready to make the leap, after my injury and after I transitioned from the NFL, I realized that I still had the platform, but that I also had to make sure that I was going to be equipped in order to be able to share a message with people. So I had to go back to school and do all those different things. And so after I decided to go back to school, that sort of turned into, whoa, this is a lot of new things, a lot of new discoveries. And I really became passionate about that. So we talked about, I planned out what the next steps were going to be. Once I finished school, I was going to start my own firm. And along with that, I was going to help people to reach their goals and their dreams. And it's really been working out well, but it really needed me to be very intentional with it.
Yes.
So many things I could have done.
Oh, yeah.
So just had a very intentional plan with it and worked that plan and just never looked back. But hey, some days, as an introvert, I struggle getting on that stage in front of 20,000 people. It's like, oh, here we go.
Wow. That's amazing, because I'm, again, a question that's just come to my mind again. I'm thinking, okay, hold on. So, okay, you said you are an introvert. I don't know if my listeners will believe that, but okay. You don't strike us as one, but it's all good. We love it. I'm just thinking, okay, does passion for what you do, I think it does, but do you find that can help if someone has a passion for something, whatever it is that they do, to help them as well to get to that goal?
Absolutely. Well, if you think about passion, I mean, it's one of those things that it's an embodiment. It's something that you really feel and you engage, those things around you. So even if you're an introvert or an extrovert, you can still have that certain level of passion, but, it's going to look different on different people. Okay. So for me, I can sit hours and write. I can sit hours and do digital marketing and different things like that, whether I'm sending out information or whether I'm doing my radio shows or whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, that passion is what drives me. And that's the thing that, when people say, well, you know what, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what my passion is. I don't know what my purpose is. I tell them, hey, pump the brakes, because at that point, now we have to do the work, because if you do the work, you can find those things that energize you. You can find those things that you all of a sudden start feeling passionate about. And when you get a little bit of evidence for those things, that's when you're very intentional about exploring it more and understanding what the next steps are, so you can really grow and develop. And if you don't have a niche for it, you create whatever that thing may be. As an entrepreneur, you create it and you run with it.
Wow. Now, I'm curious. You were talking about introverts and extroverts earlier and saying that sometimes people are one or the other. Can I be devil's advocate and ask you, can somebody be a bit of both?
Absolutely, absolutely. But the MBTI will show that you have a leaning. It will show you have a leaning towards one way more than the other. But yeah, sure, there are going to be times, and certainly situationally, where you're going to bump into things and you have to be extroverted. If you're normally an introvert and you've been processing stuff and you've been trying to figure out how to do things like a little mad scientist, okay, then when it's time to get out there and produce, that extrovert side comes out. But it's only for a period of time because you're going to run out of energy. Introvert,
Yeah. Because I started out as an introvert, I think, and then I started temping years ago, and that brought out the extrovert in me because I had to go out and speak to people, strangers every day, complete strangers every day. And people said, how do you go into all these different companies? And because it's like starting a new job every day, and you know how scary starting a new job can be, right? Yes. So I just thought, wow. And this is why I was, again, people, you're listening to the Ask-Avani Show. I must say I have been so excited to have our guest on the show today, Dr. Jason Carthen. This has been fantastic for me because I know that you do all these different things, and I wanted to ask you, I know you are also an author, and you have written a couple of books now, is it?
Actually, this would be my fourth, and I have two more that are coming out.
Fantastic. Now, I heard about a few of your books, and I wanted to ask you because the titles were so fascinating to me. One of them was Servant Leadership, an Introduction. Now, I'm curious because I thought that was an unusual title for a book. I mean, I don't know, maybe some people out there, like I did, would assume that a servant is the person who is in the employ of a leader, for example. So can you explain why you called your book that?
Absolutely. Well, I tell you what, this is so funny because, my research over the years, has really shown that the leaders that are able to get the most out of their followers are the leaders that are relational. Those are the leaders that operate with a servant mentality. Now, here's what happens. Many people will get the wrong idea of what a servant leader is. A servant leader is not someone who's sitting over in the corner. They don't have a voice. They don't do anything. Someone who's been subjugated. No, that's not a servant leader. Unfortunately, society has painted a picture in our head of what a servant is, and it's really not the case in this aspect. When you have a servant leader, this is a leader who looks at the follower more as someone to help, to guide, and to really stand in the gap for and allow them to reach their goals while also helping the company to reach its goals. But they have to tap into the heart of that follower. And when they're tapping into the heart of that follower, they understand that that follower is more important than the goals and the aspirations for that company right at that point. And so that's really the idea behind servant leadership. And when Robert Greenleaf came up with the theory all those years ago in the early 70s, the idea that it would catch so much fire that it has now, because, if you look at the typical companies over the years, you've had followers that were mistreated. Followers feel like they're not important. A servant leader is the total opposite. They are an individual that can really speak into the life of someone and get more productivity out of them than anyone could, being harsh and dictatorial with their followers.
Wow. That's fascinating. I know the listeners out there are going to want to go and grab that book and all your other books as well, because, again, you have done so many different things. You have written all these different books. I mean, your other book, I am going to attempt to pronounce this. Please tell me if I get it wrong. Now, a phenomenological inquiry of the psychological antecedents of preferred leadership behavior in a sports context. Did I get that right?
Yes, you're fine.
Yes! Now, that book was very interesting as a book title to me, because I'm thinking, again, I wondered about the context of what you call preferred leadership behavior. Now, again, obviously, I know you, as you say, you do it from the sports context. But the reason why I was curious is because over here in the UK, we have the saying, too many cooks spoil the broth. But I'm wondering, what if, for example, you have had a lot of alpha males in a team setting, as you might have like in a football team, I mean, where you're supposed to work together. How would somebody decide who's going to be the leader? Because I'm sure they've all got that alpha male. They all want to do it. Can you please explain?
Sure,
And also about
sure. Well, sometimes, it's that old pack mentality. And what I mean by that is like the strongest will rise, the one that's most aggressive in that context, and especially in a sports context. That's typically the way it goes. The one, and from a male context, and we'll talk about the female context too, but from a male context, it's the strongest one, the one who is that alpha male, the one who's the most aggressive, and or the one that really creates the greatest following from the individuals around them based upon what they're able to do, their performance, whatever it may be in that context. So that's what you'll see. But really, the idea that I had for the psychological antecedents of preferred leadership was understanding why followers figure out who they want to follow. So it could be a sports context, it could be a business context, a church context, whatever it may be. So what I found is that those followers respond to what we talked about earlier, the whole idea of a leader that demonstrates love towards them, a leader that demonstrates support, encouragement, all those things. And most importantly, when a leader models the way, the followers have something they can emulate at that point. If they don't have that, then they're trying to figure out, well, how am I supposed to act? And that's the same thing that's tied to a young person when they're still trying to figure out, well, who am I? How am I supposed to be living this life? An amazing thing happens when you're not mature at a young age and you carry that immaturity on into your adulthood. All the same stuff applies, So the sooner you can find out who you are and walk in that thing, the greater off you will be at that point.
Now, we're going to use this context, but like, for example, how would a team manager or a coach deal with any resentment that may arise because, for example, somebody was not picked to be the team leader or the captain? Like you were saying, is that another example of possible leadership, someone who is able to deal with the conflicts as well as obviously the great times?
Sure. Well, and if you think about conflict and you think about the different ways that people handle conflict, whether you're conflict avoidant or whether you're that individual that says, hey, I am going to be conflictual and we're just going to get into it, or you're a peacemaker, you have to figure out exactly, where you fall in that context. Now, when other people see you, then immediately, if you're someone who is conflict avoidant and you see someone that's engaged in conflict and they really de-escalate it, then you're going to have a certain level of respect for them. If you see someone that's total opposite, someone who's being very passive, but you're someone that's going to get in their face and you see someone come in and do that, then you're going to have a lot of respect for them. And so what you have factions that begin to be created, and people want to sort of lean towards certain individuals that are more like them. Now, the true leader that wants to impact change and wants to develop and organize an organization to go much further will see all of that. And then they will almost work like a orchestra conductor.
Oh, wow.
Saying, okay, I want you over here doing this. I want you over there doing that. And we're going to bring all this together. That's what you see at the end of the day. And that's what my research also supports as well.
Fantastic. We are talking to Dr. Jason Carthen today on the Ask Avani Show. Fascinating, as I knew it would be. We are going to take a short break and we are going to be right back on the other side after this.
Started from the bottom, now we're here. Started from the bottom, now my whole team.
Hi, this is Avani. You're listening to the Ask Avani Show, and we'll be right back on the other side after this. Good afternoon and welcome back. This is the Ask Avani Show. You are tuned into here on SoMetro Radio. We have a very special guest this afternoon. I have been asking him questions about a theme and obviously about himself. The theme has been inspiration, motivation, and leadership. Could young people today benefit from a mentor to help them be more successful, especially later on in their lives? That has been the question I have been asking my very special guest today, Dr. Jason Carthen. Good afternoon and welcome back.
Hey, it's good to be here, Vonnie.
I have been fascinated, as I have already said to my listeners already, to speak to you today. I wanted to ask you so many questions, and I am sure you can see I have a lot to ask you. Oh, wow. Just before the break, we were talking about certain behaviors that can maybe be leadership type qualities or maybe not, and how people can take from them, especially as a teenager or a youngster, how they can glean from them. And I just wanted to know, do you feel that there is a preferred way to behave that displays your leadership qualities, even when you may not get the role that you feel you're suited to, for example, whether it's a job or a particular situation?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, we talked about it at the top of the show. The whole idea, if you can get in touch with the idea of legacy, then your behaviors, your reactions, your actions, all those things are tied together. So even if you are not in a position of leadership, you still have the ability to influence. I tell people all the time, if you think about 360 degrees of leadership, you lead those above you, those that may not be on your same level, those that may be your colleagues. It's a whole idea